Right now, at this exact moment, commercial satellite imagery shows Iranian military convoys transporting what intelligence analysts identify as nuclear-capable centrifuge components toward the Fordo underground enrichment facility carved deep inside a mountain near Qom. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman just posted on social media, Iran continues legitimate nuclear research activities fully compliant with IAEA safeguards. The International Atomic Energy Agency released a contradictory statement 3 hours ago. Iran has not provided required advance notification for movement of nuclear materials as mandated by the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. One of them is describing reality. One of them is engaged in strategic deception. This is the most significant nuclear proliferation development since North Korea's 2017 hydrogen bomb test, and the decision tree branching from this moment determines whether the Middle East remains a conventional conflict zone or crosses into nuclear-armed regional powers within 18 months. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, because the timeline reveals a calculated sequence suggesting this wasn't improvised crisis but executed strategy. At 0342 hours local time on Tuesday, March 3, 2026, Planet Labs satellites conducting routine overnight passes detected unusual thermal signatures consistent with diesel generator operation at Iran's Natanz nuclear facility, approximately 250 kilometers south of Tehran. The thermal bloom indicated power consumption levels 37% above baseline, suggesting centrifuge cascade activation beyond normal operational parameters. Commercial satellite analysts at Maxar Technologies independently confirmed the activity through synthetic aperture radar imagery showing vehicle tracks in previously undisturbed areas surrounding Natanz's underground halls. At 0615 hours, approximately 2 hours and 33 minutes after the initial thermal detection, Sentinel-2 optical satellites captured convoy formation at Natanz's southern security perimeter. The imagery shows 11 heavy transport vehicles consistent with Volvo FM series trucks commonly employed by Iran's Atomic Energy Organization for sensitive cargo movement. Each truck displayed the distinctive blue and white AEOI markings visible in previous verified imagery from 2023 enrichment facility expansions. The convoy formation included 4 escort vehicles identified as Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Safir jeeps equipped with what imagery analysts assess as PKM medium machine guns, suggesting security protocols consistent with Category 1 nuclear materials transport under Iranian military doctrine. The convoy departed Natanz at 0638 hours, traveling northwest on Route 7, the primary highway connecting central Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Traffic camera footage obtained by opposition media groups and verified through geolocation analysis shows the convoy maintaining strict 80 km/h speed with civilian traffic diverted by IRGC motorcycle escorts. This represents standard Iranian protocol for strategic materials movement where speed matters less than security and avoiding attention-drawing high-speed transit. At 0847 hours, commercial satellite tracking lost direct observation as the convoy entered the Zagros mountain range, where overhead visibility becomes intermittent due to topography and cloud cover common in early March weather patterns. At 1253 hours, the convoy reappeared on satellite imagery approaching the town of Fordo, population 3,800, located 16 kilometers from the Fordo fuel enrichment plant. Fordo represents Iran's most secure nuclear facility, constructed inside Kue Kolang Mountain with entrance tunnels protected by 90 meters of rock and hardened concrete designed to withstand precision-guided munitions up to 30,000 pounds. The facility achieved operational status in 2011 and contains approximately 2,800 centrifuges across 6 cascade halls, though International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors haven't conducted comprehensive inventory since September 2024, when Iran suspended enhanced monitoring protocols following renewed American sanctions. At 1402 hours, infrared satellite imaging detected elevated thermal signatures consistent with facility entrance blast doors opening, an event occurring only during material transfer operations or senior leadership inspections. The convoy entered Fordo's vehicle tunnel at 1409 hours and disappeared from satellite observation. As of this recording, 18 hours after initial detection, neither Iran nor the International Atomic Energy Agency has provided official explanation for the convoy movement, the materials transported, or the current status of operations inside Fordo. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what Fordo is and what it isn't. Fordo isn't a research reactor producing medical isotopes. It isn't a training facility educating nuclear engineers. Fordo exists for one purpose: enriching uranium to weapons-grade purity while protected from military strikes that could destroy surface facilities like Natanz. The facility's location inside a mountain represents conscious strategic choice. Iran invested hundreds of millions constructing this facility in a location maximizing military protection while minimizing civilian proximity that would constrain defensive operations. Intelligence assessments from the Institute for Science and International Security estimate Fordo's construction required removing over 400,000 cubic meters of rock and pouring 85,000 cubic meters of reinforced concrete between 2002 and 2009, all conducted covertly until Western intelligence agencies detected the facility through signals intelligence in 2009. The centrifuges at Fordo represent Iran's most advanced enrichment technology. According to technical specifications verified by IAEA inspections conducted between 2016 and 2024, Fordo primarily houses IR-6 centrifuges, Iran's second-generation design achieving separation capacity approximately 10 times more efficient than the IR-1 first-generation centrifuges deployed at Natanz. Each IR-6 centrifuge stands 8 meters tall with rotor assembly spinning at supersonic velocity, using centrifugal force to separate uranium-235 isotopes from uranium-238. The IR-6 design incorporates carbon fiber rotor tubes rather than miraging steel, reducing weight while increasing rotational speed, directly translating to higher enrichment output per machine. Here's what that means operationally. According to calculations published by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, a single cascade of 164 IR-6 centrifuges operating continuously can produce sufficient weapons-grade uranium for one nuclear device in approximately 2 months starting from 20% enriched feedstock. Iran currently possesses over 120 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, acknowledged by both Iran and the IAEA. The gap between 60% enrichment and weapons-grade 90% enrichment represents relatively small technical barrier compared to the initial jump from natural uranium at 0.7% to 60%. Expert analysis from former IAEA Deputy Director Ali Heinonen indicates that with existing infrastructure and feedstock, Iran's breakout timeline to weapons-grade material has compressed to as little as 2 to 3 weeks if Iran decided to maximize enrichment operations without regard for international monitoring. The satellite imagery showing convoy movement suggests Iran may be relocating either centrifuge equipment or enriched uranium stocks from Natanz to Fordo. Both scenarios carry profound implications. If Iran is moving advanced centrifuges to Fordo, it suggests preparation for enrichment operations Iran expects will face external military threats requiring mountain protection. Surface facilities at Natanz remain vulnerable to precision strikes from Israeli F-35I Adir stealth fighters equipped with GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster munitions. Though even these weapons cannot penetrate Fordo's mountain protection, relocating enrichment capacity to Fordo would position Iran to continue weapons-grade production even after potential strikes eliminate surface facilities. If Iran is moving enriched uranium to Fordo, the implications prove even more concerning. Concentrating Iran's enriched uranium stockpile inside a strike-proof facility would protect feedstock necessary for weapons production while signaling Iran's seriousness about maintaining nuclear option regardless of international pressure. Dr. David Albright, president of the Institute for Science and International Security and former UN weapons inspector, analyzed preliminary satellite imagery and stated, "The convoy configuration and security protocols are consistent with Category 1 nuclear materials transport. If Iran is consolidating enriched uranium at Fordo, they're creating a protected reserve that survives any realistic military action short of tactical nuclear weapons. The timing of this movement cannot be separated from broader regional dynamics." This convoy departed Natanz exactly 72 hours after diplomatic talks in Vienna between Iranian and American officials collapsed without agreement on nuclear program limitations. Those talks represented the first direct bilateral engagement since President Trump withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2024 and reimposed comprehensive sanctions targeting Iran's oil exports, banking sector, and industrial supply chains. Iranian negotiators in Vienna reportedly demanded complete sanctions relief before any new nuclear restrictions, while American negotiators insisted on intrusive inspection protocols and permanent limitations on enrichment capacity. Neither side demonstrated willingness to compromise on core positions, and talks concluded Friday without scheduling follow-up sessions. The convoy movement also occurs against backdrop of escalating Iranian rhetoric regarding nuclear weapons capability. On February 28th, just 3 days before the satellite-detected convoy, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei delivered a televised address to Revolutionary Guard commanders stating, "Iran possesses the technical knowledge and industrial capacity to produce whatever weapons systems are necessary to defend the Islamic Republic and the Iranian nation. No external power can dictate Iran's legitimate defense requirements." While Khamenei didn't explicitly reference nuclear weapons, defense analysts at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy assessed the statement as deliberately ambiguous language maintaining strategic uncertainty about Iran's intentions while signaling capability. Iranian officials have historically maintained that religious edicts prohibit nuclear weapons development, pointing to a 2003 fatwa attributed to Khamenei declaring such weapons contrary to Islamic law. However, senior Iranian politicians have increasingly questioned whether this prohibition remains absolute under all circumstances. In January 2026, Mohammad Javad Larijani, former senior advisor to Iran's judiciary and member of Iran's Expediency Council, stated in an interview with Iranian Students News Agency, "If Iran's existence is threatened, all defensive options become not only permissible but obligatory. The protection of the Islamic Republic supersedes all other considerations." This represents significant shift from previous Iranian positioning that nuclear weapons remained absolutely prohibited regardless of security circumstances. From Iran's strategic perspective, the calculus driving toward nuclear capability becomes comprehensible when examining the regional security environment. Iran faces hostile relationships with Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, all of which maintain advanced conventional military capabilities and close security partnerships with the United States. Israel possesses estimated 90 to 300 nuclear warheads according to assessments by the Federation of American Scientists, creating existential threat Iran cannot counter through conventional forces. Saudi Arabia has openly discussed pursuing nuclear weapons if Iran obtains them, while the UAE maintains civil nuclear program providing technical foundation for potential weapons program. From Tehran's viewpoint, nuclear weapons represent the ultimate deterrent, preventing regime change operations or existential military strikes. American policy toward Iran's nuclear program has oscillated between diplomatic engagement and maximum pressure. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action negotiated during the Obama administration temporarily constrained Iran's enrichment program in exchange for sanctions relief, but President Trump's withdrawal destroyed the agreement's foundation. Trump's maximum pressure campaign successfully devastated Iran's economy, contracting GDP by 8% in 2019 and collapsing oil exports from 2.5 million barrels daily to approximately 400,000 barrels daily. However, the pressure campaign failed to achieve its stated objective of forcing Iran to negotiate comprehensive deal covering nuclear program, ballistic missiles, and regional proxy forces. Instead, Iran responded by progressively abandoning JCPOA restrictions, resuming enrichment to 60% purity, installing advanced centrifuges, and restricting IAEA inspector access. Israeli policy has consistently emphasized preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons through any means necessary, including unilateral military action. Israeli officials have repeatedly stated that Iran approaching nuclear weapons capability represents intolerable threat justifying preventive strikes regardless of international opposition. Former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who returned to office in 2025, has built political career around opposition to Iranian nuclear program and has authorized multiple covert operations targeting Iranian nuclear scientists, facilities, and supply chains. Israeli military maintains strike packages specifically designed for Iranian nuclear facilities, including long-range F-35I Adir stealth fighters, aerial refueling capabilities enabling operations at Iranian distances, and advanced bunker-penetrating munitions. The critical strategic question becomes, at what point does Israel determine that Iran has crossed the threshold requiring military action? Analysts at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv have identified several potential red lines, including weapons-grade enrichment, weaponization activities like explosive lens testing, and operational integration of nuclear warheads with ballistic missile delivery systems. The satellite imagery, showing convoy movement to Fordo, may not itself constitute red line crossing, but it represents movement along continuum toward nuclear weapons capability. Each step Iran takes consolidating materials, advancing centrifuges, and protecting facilities makes eventual weapons production more achievable and Israeli military action more likely. According to Dr. Emily Landau, senior researcher at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies and expert on nuclear arms control, the challenge facing Israeli decision-makers is determining when Iran crosses the point of no return. Israel cannot wait until Iran actually assembles a nuclear device because by that point the program has become so distributed and protected that conventional military strikes cannot reliably eliminate it. Israel must act while Iranian capability remains concentrated enough that strikes can achieve decisive effects, but acting too early creates international backlash and potentially triggers regional war without actually preventing eventual Iranian capability. This is the impossible calculation Israeli planners face. The military feasibility of strikes against Fordo has been extensively analyzed by defense experts and remains highly uncertain. The facility's location under 90 meters of mountain rock places it beyond the penetration capability of most conventional munitions. The United States maintains GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker buster munition specifically designed to attack deeply buried targets. Delivered by B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, the GBU-57 can penetrate approximately 60 meters of reinforced concrete or 40 meters of rock. However, analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies note that even GBU-57 likely cannot guarantee destruction of Fordo's deepest halls. Multiple strikes in precise sequence might collapse entrance tunnels or damage ventilation systems, potentially rendering the facility inoperable without directly destroying centrifuge halls. Israel does not possess aircraft capable of carrying GBU-57, limiting Israeli strike options against Fordo to smaller precision-guided munitions and potential use of ground-penetrating tactical nuclear weapons from Israel's own arsenal. The latter option remains politically unthinkable given international ramifications, leaving Israel dependent on conventional capabilities of uncertain effectiveness. This vulnerability explains Israeli pressure on the United States to maintain credible military option. American officials have repeatedly stated that military force remains option if diplomacy fails, but the Biden administration previously demonstrated reluctance to authorize strikes that would trigger major regional conflict. The scenario modeling must account for three distinct trajectory possibilities emerging from current situation. First, diplomatic de-escalation through renewed negotiations. Second, limited military action targeting Iranian nuclear facilities. Third, escalatory spiral producing regional war potentially involving direct American-Iranian confrontation. Each scenario carries distinct probability and requires specific conditions to materialize. Scenario 1 projects diplomatic de-escalation with probability assessment of approximately 30%. This pathway requires both Iran and the United States to return to negotiations with greater flexibility than demonstrated in Vienna last week. Iran would need to accept meaningful restrictions on enrichment capacity and enhanced IAEA monitoring in exchange for phased sanctions relief allowing Iranian oil exports to resume. The United States would need to offer sufficiently attractive sanctions relief to justify Iranian concessions to hardline domestic constituencies opposing any agreement with Washington. European intermediaries, including France and Germany, would likely play a facilitation role, enabling both sides to retreat from confrontational positions while claiming diplomatic victory. The challenge for diplomatic scenario is that neither side currently demonstrates political will for compromise. Iranian hardliners view maximum pressure campaign as proof that American commitments cannot be trusted regardless of agreements reached. Supreme Leader Khamenei has publicly stated that negotiations with America have proven futile and that Iran must rely on indigenous capability rather than agreements with unreliable partners. American officials, particularly in Republican-controlled Congress, oppose any agreement that doesn't comprehensively address Iranian ballistic missile programs and regional proxy forces in addition to nuclear program. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo stated in recent Wall Street Journal interview, "Any deal that doesn't address missiles, Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria is just the old failed JCPOA with prettier wrapping paper." For diplomatic de-escalation to succeed, some external catalyst would need to shift calculations for both parties. Possible catalysts include catastrophic economic crisis in Iran, forcing regime to prioritize sanctions relief over nuclear advancement, or major security crisis elsewhere drawing American attention and creating incentive to resolve Iranian situation diplomatically rather than militarily. Oil market dynamics could also influence calculations. If global oil prices spike due to supply disruptions elsewhere, Iran gains leverage through its potential to further disrupt markets by threatening Strait of Hormuz transit. Conversely, sustained low oil prices increase Iranian economic pain, potentially making sanctions relief more attractive. Scenario 2 envisions limited military strikes with probability assessment of approximately 45%. This scenario involves Israeli or American precision strikes targeting Iranian nuclear facilities, potentially including Natanz, Fordo entrance infrastructure, uranium conversion facilities at Isfahan, and heavy water production at Iraq. The strikes would aim to set back Iranian nuclear program by destroying critical infrastructure while avoiding mass civilian casualties that would trigger uncontrollable escalation. Strike planners would time operations to minimize casualties among Iranian nuclear workers, potentially conducting strikes during night shifts when fewer personnel are present. Iran's response to limited strikes would determine whether situation stabilizes or escalates beyond control. Iranian military doctrine emphasizes asymmetric retaliation, including ballistic missile strikes against Israeli cities, attacks on American military installations across the Persian Gulf, and activation of proxy forces including Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Iraq and Syria. However, Iranian leadership understands that excessive retaliation could trigger American intervention, including comprehensive strikes against Iranian military infrastructure, command and control facilities, and potentially regime leadership. Iran's challenge would be demonstrating that attacks carry costs while avoiding provocation that produces existential American response. Historical precedent from Israel's 1981 strike on Iraq's Osirak reactor and 2007 strike on Syria's Al-Kabar reactor suggests that decisive preemptive attacks can destroy nuclear programs without triggering sustained military conflict. However, both Iraq and Syria lacked Iran's retaliatory capabilities and regional reach. Iran possesses inventory of over 3,000 ballistic missiles, according to Defense Intelligence Agency assessments, including Shahab-3, Sejil-2, and Khorramshahr-2 systems, with ranges covering Israel, Saudi Arabia, and American military bases across the region. Iran also maintains extensive proxy networks that could conduct simultaneous attacks across multiple countries, creating multi-front crisis, overwhelming defensive capabilities. Dr. Michael Knights, senior fellow at the Washington Institute and expert on Iranian military capabilities, analyzed potential Iranian retaliation scenarios and concluded Iran's response would likely include symbolic ballistic missile strikes demonstrating capability while carefully calibrating to avoid mass casualties that would justify American escalation. Iran might target military facilities, oil infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and UAE, or shipping in the Persian Gulf. The goal would be imposing costs while preserving options for eventual de-escalation. The nightmare scenario is miscalculation, where Iranian retaliation causes unexpected casualties, triggering American response that spirals beyond both sides' intentions. Scenario 3 describes catastrophic escalation pathway with probability assessment of approximately 25%. This scenario emerges if initial military strikes fail to achieve decisive results, triggering second wave of attacks met by extensive Iranian retaliation, producing mass casualties. The escalation spiral could produce sustained American air campaign targeting not just nuclear facilities but comprehensive Iranian military infrastructure, including Revolutionary Guard bases, naval facilities, air defense systems, and ballistic missile launching sites. Iranian retaliation could include attempts to close the Strait of Hormuz through missile attacks on commercial shipping, mine-laying, and swarming small boat attacks on military vessels attempting to maintain maritime transit.